I am pleased to introduce Mr. Michael Molina as our speaker and guest today. I got the chance to meet Mr. Molina in his capacity as the head of school for the Bishop John T. Walker School for Boys in Southeast DC. He started this role last July, so I think we'll be able to ask him some questions about what it's been like to lead a school during the pandemic. The Bishop Walker School is a tuition-free Episcopal school for boys from traditionally underserved communities. And the tour that I got to take, was really inspiring for me. And I think it's one of the most innovative programs that we have in the city, which I'm really excited that he's here with us today to share more about it. And Mr. Molina previously served as the founding director of the Finney Green program, a wraparound student support program for boys from underrepresented communities at the Gilman School in Baltimore. He's also an acclaimed poet, writer, and spoken word artist, and holds a JD from Yale Law School and a BA from Xavier University of Louisiana. I'm just going to drop a couple links in the chat, one to the school's website and one to Mr. Molina's personal page, if that's okay. And we'll pass it over to you, Mr. Molina. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. It was good to meet you when you came to visit. It was inspiring to hear about all that you envision for the schools in DC, and it was a blessing to have you come in and ask us and think about us as a potential site for learning. Thank you. And thank you all for welcoming me as well. I have on my desk your statement about what is true. Now I'm blanking on the list of 4 things because my father, Dr. Anthony Lewis Molina, was a part of Rotary Club where he worked in Montgomery, Alabama. So what your mission is close to my heart, and I'm excited to be here. I'm going to repeat what Mr. Chang just said, Alistair just said about our school. I'll say it 2 more times in this talk just to remind you of what we're up to and how it relates to what I'll talk to you about, which to some extent is my own story. We are the Bishop John T. Walker School for Boys. We are named after Bishop John T. Walker, who's the first African-American Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C., of the Episcopal Diocese. Bishop Walker was also the first African-American student at the Virginia Theological Seminary back in the 50s. He also was the first African-American teacher at St. Paul's, a venerable boarding school up in New Hampshire back in the 1960s, before becoming the first African-American bishop of the Episcopal Diocese. He was a man of many firsts, clearly, but also in those firsts saw himself as not only a person of bridge building, but someone who would challenge the diocese to grow and expand. He was part of advocating for the first women priests in the Episcopal Church in DC. He was a part of extending the footprint and the reach of the diocese beyond Northwest DC and some of the traditional places where the diocese has reach into Southeast DC, and with a real intention for there to be a unity across some of the difference in Washington, D.C. And so we are named in his honor by those who knew him best, fellow priests, bishops, and others who saw his life as a model. And what we hope is that our students become like Bishop Walker firsts, who go into environments where they may be underrepresented, that may be very different from where they come from, and that they are bridge builders, and that they are challengers of those institutions to grow and be better. And so that's what we are. So again, I'm Michael Otieno Molina. I share my entire name because it is very meaningful to me. I'm named Michael to represent my family history as Catholics. I was named after the archangel who slew the devil, Saint Michael. And I like to think that my parents had pretty high aspirations for me. I hope I lived up to that to some extent, but I do know that I've, for the most of my life, have spent trying to challenge those things that drag humanity down, get in the way of our common understanding, which I feel like is the basis for solving the problems that you all exist and hope to solve as a Rotary Club and all of your individual endeavors. I'm going to make a bold, strange statement as a 45-year-old man. Elementary school saved my life. Elementary school saved my life. That is strange to say, to be 45 years old and still thinking elementary school was deeply impactful for me. But I was 13 when I was in late night New Orleans, my hometown, riding in a stolen car. An older guy who I idolized had stolen a car and taken me for a joyride, and we pulled into a gas station when another teenager, not a lot older than myself, pulled out a gun and put it in my face. He wanted the chain that was around my neck. And I remember thinking in that moment, how did I get here? How am I in this circumstance? How am I in this moment? And the reason I asked that is because not, 2 years earlier, I won the Griffin Award at my elementary school for the top student in elementary, best grades, best character, best all-around student. So how do I go from winning the Griffin Award to sitting in a stolen car with a gun in my face, facing life or death, late night New Orleans in the streets where I had no business being? Well, I got lost in middle school. I lost my way. I got attracted to being a bad boy. Music told us at that time being a bad boy was fun. Movies at that time told us being a bad boy was fun. And I had street heroes who tried to convince me that being a bad boy was fun. But in that moment with that gun in my face, I made a decision. And that decision was that I was not going to be a bad boy. I did not want to be a bad boy. I wasn't cut out for it. But the real reason I was able to make that decision is because I had an alternative planted in my heart and in my soul. And what I knew from Gene Gordon Elementary School down in New Orleans, a school that was on the cusp of integration. We're talking the early 80s, and it was a very intentionally populated school of Black and white and Vietnamese, which is the largest kind of minority in New Orleans, students. And I grew up in that school, and at that school, they showed me the joy of learning and taught me the resilience to go through the challenges that come along with learning. They encouraged me to love myself as I am and to trust that who I am is good enough for any circumstance. And it convinced me, most importantly, that I had something important to offer to the world. That was elementary school. And when I made that decision at 13 to stop trying to be a bad boy and stop following behind trouble, my life changed. I applied to get into a competitive high school, which was a test-in high school. I got in, did very well. I went to Xavier University of Louisiana and HBCU, immediately deciding to start mentoring younger children, knowing that, I had a faithful decision I made as a middle schooler. I wanted to go back and influence some other folks to make good decisions. Did well at Xavier University, got into Yale Law School. At Yale Law School, I didn't have visions of millions of dollars dancing in my head or judgeships or becoming the first Black president. I actually wanted to do something about the world around me and make sure I made it better for the children coming from behind me. So one of the things I'm most proud of being at Yale was working with Roberto Clemente Middle School and mentoring and teaching middle schoolers the history of the civil rights movement to convince them that the sacrifices made for them to go to school was worth their best effort. It was a transformative experience and convinced me that my life was set to be about youth development and preparing young people to make great decisions no matter what they faced. Working at Roberto Clemente Middle School set a clock. And when I graduated from Yale, I went directly into youth development, working first in juvenile halls and for public policy to prevent young people from being incarcerated and provide more opportunity for young people to be rehabilitated and get access to educational opportunity. I worked as an advocate for public schools, being a product of public schools and the son of a public school teacher and a community college president, another version of public schooling. Helped to found a charter school, a language immersion charter school in Atlanta, Georgia, to make available to folks who couldn't afford it, the highest level of education, multilingual, 50-50 language immersion for free. And then I moved into independent schools, elite, college prep environment where people pay $30,000, $40,000 to go to school. You might say, where did that come from? And I said the same thing to myself. But it was an opportunity to learn an angle, a perspective, a dimension of education that I had never experienced before. And I thank God for that opportunity, because it brought me to the Bishop Walker School. And here at the Bishop Walker School, again, we are an independent, tuition-free Episcopal school. We serve 100% African-American boys. We are in Southeast DC. I'm looking out from the front of our facade, and I'll take you out in a second to show you it. And I'm looking out on low-income housing that's being encroached upon by gentrification. And so we have families who are pushed out of this community into PG County, which is right across a protected bit of natural environment and creek into Maryland. We're right on the border, right at the bottom of DC. So we do have some students from PG County now. Being here is a blessing, because it allows me to go back to the root of where I made a decision for my life, what planted the seeds in me to make that decision as a young man, as a really young man in middle school, to want to choose a life of health, well-being, peace, and good, as opposed to trouble. And my hope is that we plant those seeds in the hearts and minds of all 80 of our boys, our scholars, and instill hope in their families for positivity, generational positivity from this point forward. I will also note a couple things, and then really I want to answer your questions, because I know running a school in this time period is quite an adventure, but it is also a pretty interesting professional and institutional challenge to try and figure out how to run a school in this context. And so I'd love to answer your questions to inform you a little bit about what it's been like. But what I'll say is, and more specifically, what we offer to our scholars for free is access to an education that they would likely pay tens of thousands of dollars for. We have 8-to-1 ratio in terms of student to teachers. We have a lead teacher and a teaching assistant in every classroom. Those small class sizes allow us to know, love, and challenge every boy very specifically. It allows us to be innovative in our model of teaching, and hopefully become a model that is replicable and instructive to other schools, not only in DC, in the region and beyond. Again, we are 100% African-American. And as I was taught in an integrated environment to love exactly who I am, we do have a positive racial identity focus. We try to convince our boys that no matter what statistics there are that are up against them, no matter what systemic issues may be roadblocks in their way, they have a legacy of resilience, resistance, and rising up through challenge, and that they can lean on that and draw strength from that so that they can grow into powerful people, powerful young men. So I'm very, very honored to be in this role, to be here. We had our opening meetings for faculty this morning, and I got the chance to engage with our faculty. And I know that we are a community of very engaged and committed adults who believe in these young men. As a tuition-free school, and I'll end here and open it up for questions. As a tuition-free school, 80% of our operating budget is derived from donations, whether in kind or gifts. A massive part of our, of our model requires partnerships with community organizations. We are located at the ARC. If you've not heard of the ARC, it is a collective of community service providers, beautiful facility. We have green buildings. I know you all are interested in carbon footprint. We have a green roof and, metal shading to reduce the amount of expenditure on HVAC and to increase the natural sunlight that comes into the building, to reduce the use of electricity. We teach our boys about the building and help them learn science, to learn why we need to create buildings in this way. We have semi-permeable walk spaces around and water retention ponds to help protect the creek that's right next to us. And the ARC is established to be a kind of an oasis of opportunity for this community. We're a part of that. And as such, we partner with everyone from Children's National Health, who did our COVID-19 testing in order to help us get back into the building. We partnered with Washington School for Ballet, who's also housed here, along with Children's National, who's done movement classes virtually for our boys during distance learning. We partner with Levine School of Music, who's done virtual music classes. We partner with DC Central Kitchen, who provided meals for our students in person and which we delivered to homes to help with food insecurity. We partner at every opportunity that we can, and we have to, because we don't have an income generation in terms of tuition. So what I would invite you to do is to consider us as a place to give a gift to. If you are looking for a place to help to support, encourage you to go to our website. It's already there, but I'll put it up here again. I'll open up to questions, and then I do have some images to share if you're interested in seeing what it, as you know, visually stimulated by what we've accomplished in this time of COVID. So thank you for your attention, and I'll answer any questions you have. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Molina. I appreciate your overview, and it would be great to see some of those images. Actually, we've got some questions lined up, but I think that might take us down a different path.
Okay, sure. I'll share my screen and give you some images. Well, the first image here, can you all see that?
Yes.
That's Bishop Walker with Dr. King. Dr. King's last sermon was delivered at the National Cathedral, and Bishop Walker walked him to the Canterbury pulpit to make that speech. Again, our namesake is deeply rooted, was a great friend of Bishop Desmond Tutu. We have images of him visiting the school all around campus. So he was very active in the anti-apartheid movement. So here's our namesake introducing Dr. King to his last sermon. We have a young man here who is doing blended learning. So blended learning is an approach to distance learning that we took early on in the pandemic. Blended learning means you take the best of what you can accomplish in person and try to move it over to the digital space. And then you utilize the tools that the digital space provided to enhance the in-person learning experience. So what you're seeing is a young man who's sitting out at the Ark farm. And so the Ark has an acre farm, and our boys have plots where they've planted and learned about the life cycle of plants outdoors all throughout COVID. And so we held classes out there. And you see he has his laptop and he has his notes and he's got his gloves and his pencil, and he's ready to learn with tactile experiences as well as the digital platforms that allow for that. And so very early on, we recognized that the challenge of COVID presented an opportunity to innovate. Here you see them planting seeds along with one of our partners. So we partnered with Living Classrooms Foundation. Living Classrooms is an outdoor learning organization in Baltimore and in DC. They have control of Heritage and Kingman Islands on the Anacostia River. And so since last year, they provided learning kits, tactile learning kits for our boys, came out and did lessons with them in the garden. And then this summer, we had a summer program called Summer Restore 2.0. And it's a version of kind of recapturing academic skills, recapturing school spirit. And the boys went with Living Classrooms out to Kingman Island and Heritage Island to go canoe and fish and learn about the natural environment out there as a way to provide some summer fun to the academic enrichment, add that to the academic enrichment they were getting. So an example of one of our partnerships, here they are, it's close study. And now I'll just share a bit about partnerships again. So as an Episcopal school, we are actually a part of the Episcopal Diocese. We're not a separate entity at all. And so all of the parishes in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, and some of those in Maryland see us as an opportunity to serve. And so Reading is Fundamental is a program that our volunteer librarian here, centered here, reading, Mrs. Marquardt, has brought to us, and along with one of our board members, Jane Dana, to provide opportunities for authors to come speak or for parishioners to come and read to our scholars. So just this past spring, we did Reading is Fundamental outdoors safely. And here are some images that show what we learned. So this coincided with the coming of Brood X, the cicadas, who we all loved and enjoyed, I'm sure, for a bit of time. And so we sat underneath the trees, and the cicadas were booming, singing. And we learned about how Benjamin Banneker, in his almanac, Benjamin Banneker being an African-American scientist and philosopher, wrote almanacs in the 1700s, helped to plot out Washington, D.C. as a city, African-American from Maryland. Benjamin Banneker actually discovered the first cycle of brood X and tracked it and made note of it. And so we learned about Benjamin Banneker sitting under the cicadas singing to us. And this was all the design of the folks at Reading is Fundamental and Mrs. Marquardt, who's, again, our volunteer librarian who dreams up just beautiful opportunities for our boys to read. And please don't let me forget, I have the newest thing that they're putting together around baseball. And I'll say a little bit about that. But a couple more images here. Here are the boys. They brought popsicles so the boys could sit down and listen to the cicadas sing and eat popsicles after the reading. So that was the older boys. And then the younger boys came and we did the same thing for them. And I'll just tell one quick story and then I'll open it up to questions. This young man was so afraid of the cicadas. He was screaming and running every time they flew around him. And of course, they were flying everywhere. And so one of the stories that was read was about, all of God's creatures are precious. And as a part of, at some point in that story, something clicked for him. And he decided he was going to engage with a cicada, and he picked it up. And he was so proud of himself, and all the other boys were so impressed with him and his gentle handling of the cicada. And so we are, again, I'll say it one more time. I said I would say it 3 times. We are independent, meaning we are not part of the public school system, which allows us to innovate in some unique and interesting ways. We are Episcopal, which means that we have a focus on character education as well as investment in the whole child and the whole family. We provide food assistance, rental assistance, and all kind of help when families are in crisis. We are located in Southeast DC by design and are 100% African-American boys. As a result of all of that, we are a wonderful opportunity to invest in the future. So I hope that you consider us. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mr. Molina. So Bill Day has a question. Bill, I'll pass to you first.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your service. I appreciate that, particularly because I grew up in the Episcopal Church. So question is, I've been to the public schools in Southeast. Is there any hope that we can renew our commitment to public education and transform those schools back from prisons into schools that offer the kind of education that you are offering now?
I believe part of what you're referring to is the school to prison pipeline. And this is a framing, a kind of a social justice framing that I used personally coming out of law school in order to frame the crisis in education, in that education wasn't serving to prepare children for success in life, was instead convincing them of their lack of contribution or the lack of ability, so much so that the idea is that if they continue to go to these poor performing schools, the kind of folklore is that you could measure the prison population by 3rd grade test scores. And while there is a deep truth to the systemic racism and the systemic inequity that undergirds some of the ways people approach public education and some of the impacts of less than excellent education for young people, I would push back a little bit in that children aren't predetermined by the conditions around them. And I'll be honest that we're about to endeavor on a strategic planning process in which we will engage our mission and think about ways that we might expand and evolve it. But one of the things that is in our vision is that our boys we seek to alter the trajectory of our scholars. And I take a little issue with that, and we're working on that because I don't believe that our boys are destined for failure if they don't come to the Bishop Walker School. If they go to a public school, they're destined for prison or destined for failure. I believe that they have inherent value, resourcefulness, resilience, family input that will hopefully give them a great opportunity. But having said that, we have designed the school to do everything we can to ensure that the young boys, the scholars who come to us, get excellent and attentive instruction, that they get character education to help them navigate what is an ever more complex world. And our model, being small, being dedicated to the whole child, our model might be instructive to public schools. Not that a public school could do everything we do. We're Episcopal, obviously, so we can talk about things that public schools generally cannot. But our model might be instructive, and some parts of it could be replicated in public schools in Southeast DC and beyond. And that's part of our aspiration. Part of our aspiration is that we can accomplish our goals in terms of academic achievement and character education, so that we can model, for folks in public schools, charter schools, wherever, a great way to do this. Because we are not tuition based, we're not transactional. So we don't hoard our ideas. We don't, we aren't territorial whatsoever. If we learn something that works, we're going to share it with Alistair. And if he thinks it's worthwhile, I'm sure he'll share it with the public schools. So I don't disagree that public schools are struggling, and that the consequences of that struggling could be dire in the life of a child and of a community. But I think that every single child has inherent value that can overcome that. And because we believe that, we invest heavily in each child.
If I may just jump in there, Mr. Molina, and Bill, I think your question actually is a big one that I'm thinking through, and for our public school system, right, is how do we highlight the work that folks like Mr. Molina have been able to do, right, in being able to create the outcomes we want to see for our kids and replicate that within our public school system. In part is why I'm particularly excited to have him speak with us today and share what he's working on. I'll pass now to Bill, President Dent, to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. The work you're doing is really fantastic. And of course, I think you truly are a model for what most of us would like to see be the opportunities, educational opportunities that children have at that young age. How do you get support for your program besides what the Episcopal Church itself might be able to provide?
We have giving. So we have our development director, assistant head for development, David Shepard, is on the call. I wanted him to see this and give me pointers on how I could better tell our story. But he and others organize an annual dinner that raises $1 million for us every year. So if you ever want a wonderful gala and a good cause, there's that. We do other campaigns. We have a campaign around Juneteenth that we have launched last year. But we have parishes who give a lot of resources, but we also have a lot of individual donors who just care about the future. We have folks who were contemporaneous, colleagues or friends or students of Bishop Walker, who really want his name to live on and his legacy to live on. So that's really 80% of what we get is from giving. And so it's a challenge. It's an ambitious model, but we're gonna continue to be ambitious. I saw one question about my name, Otieno. Yes, it is from Kenya. My father was studied to be a seminarian, left the seminary and went to school and was studying drama education. And he met a man from Kenya who gave everyone a name from Kenya. And he gave my father that name. My father gave it to me. We are very diverse in our 100% quote unquote Blackness. We have many first generation African families from Togo, from Nigeria, from Ethiopia, from the Caribbean as well. And so we are deliberate and thoughtful about how we engage with the diaspora and make sure that we tap into the great, wonderful resource that is. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great. And we're coming close on time, so I'll pass to Ken. And it seems like he's got a great opportunity. Ken, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing? Thank you, Mr. Molina, for speaking to our club. We love your work. Just wondering if you guys are accepting back to school donations, because I'm at DuPont Underground and we're doing a citywide back to school drive. So I was just wondering if we could partner with you guys.
Absolutely. My email is in the chat. I'll put it in again. Please reach out. And even if we do have folks who are doing drives for us, but even if we are, if we have enough, we share bounty. So there's a school that's a sister school to ours, the Washington School for Girls, which is a 4th through 8th grade Catholic school. We share liberally with them. We will give, you know, if we have an abundance and a bounty, we'll put a table out, let everyone know in the neighborhood. We have stuff to give away. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thanks. Great idea, Ken. And two other quick notes that came up. One that May wrote that September is Rotary's Basic Education and Literacy Month. So we'll be sure to keep you in our conversations. And Bill made a note to look at the website. He's saying that he's getting a little bit of trouble there. So
We are in the midst of a new launch. So if you're having trouble, please be persistent and patient with us.
And I think Mark's got a really great question, actually, about student selection. Mark, if you're there to ask it.
Yes, Dr. Molina, this is an inspiring conversation. Excellent job. How do you select your students, and do you monitor them after they graduate to see how they're performing?
Excellent question. So we have an admissions process that involves evaluative testing. It's not a bar to entry. It's just so that we understand what children are bringing so that we can better serve their needs. We have just launched an alumni association last year. It's not typical for an elementary school to have an alumni association, but we're kind of designing what that would look like. And so our earliest students are currently juniors in high school. We are about 13 years old, 10 to 13 years old, depending on where you want to place our pen for starting point. But, and a parent reached out and said, hey, what are y'all going to do to help with SAT prep? And so that launched the process of talking about an alumni association. We are beginning to do better of tracking where our students have gone and how they performed. But that's a part of what I came to bring to the Bishop Walker School, is really an intentionality around not only whole child investment, but long-term investment in the child.
Great, fantastic. And I think that's our time. So I'm going to pass back to President Bill. We've got a little thing for you.
Yes, we do. And I just want to say that it was truly inspiring. I'm an educator myself, and at some point I'd love to come out and visit your school. I grew up in Southeast Washington. So.
Okay, well, come home.
Thank you. So we have a tradition in our club of planting a tree in the honor of each of our speakers. We do this in partnership with the National Park Service. It's called Trees for the Capital. Originally, it started with planting replacement cherry blossom trees around the Pebble Basin. We've done quite a few of those. More recently, we also added a second track, which includes the retreeing of the downtown park. So we will be planting a tree in your honor, and to symbolize that, we'll be sending you in the mail a certificate. I'm sorry I cannot hand it to you personally. We call our tree certificate. All right, so you can expect that in the mail, and definitely would like to keep in touch. And I want to thank Alistair again for connecting us with you.